Under the warm sun, a weary waitress clears empty plates and wipes the counter inside a quiet diner. Suddenly, the door creaks open and a small boy steps in, wrinkled, stained clothes, his hand clutching a single nickel. "Can I buy some food with this?" he asks softly. Her heart breaks. Ignoring her boss's rules, she slips her last dollars into the register and serves him a hot meal. Moments later, she's fired. But what she doesn't know is that this small act of kindness will change her life forever. Before we go back, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story will move you even more. The sun hung high in a clear blue sky over Portland, casting a warm golden light across the bustling streets. Inside Rosie's diner on the corner of Maple and 3rd, the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off the chrome counter and highlighting the faded checkered floor that had seen better days. "Here's your order, sir." "Have a wonderful day," Sarah Mitchell said, her voice carrying a brightness she didn't feel as she slid the tray across the counter. The customer barely glanced at her, just grabbed his food and walked away, eyes glued to his phone. Sarah's smile vanished the second he turned his back. 28 years old, a software developer turned waitress. This wasn't supposed to be her life. 6 months ago, she'd been writing code at a promising tech startup in downtown Portland. The work had been challenging, the pay decent enough to cover rent and help her parents with bills. Then came the restructuring. Budget cuts, they'd called it, though everyone knew it was really about office politics and who knew whom. Her manager had pulled her aside one Tuesday morning and told her she wasn't presentable enough for the company's new direction. She'd worked in the back office, never met a single client, but apparently that hadn't mattered. Now here she was, serving meatloaf to people who barely saw her as human, her feet aching in worn-out sneakers, her future shrinking with every passing day. The afternoon lull had finally settled in after the lunch rush. Sarah leaned against the counter and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Through the sun-dappled window, she could see the street alive with pedestrians and cars, their reflections dancing on the glass. It would have been beautiful if she wasn't so tired, if she wasn't so scared. $1,800, that's what she owed her landlord, Mr. Henderson. 2 months of back rent and he'd been clear pay by Friday or pack your things. That gave her 3 days. 72 hours to come up with money she simply didn't have. She'd already taken an advance on her paycheck to cover her mother's medical bills after that bad fall last month. Her bank account was overdrawn. Her credit cards were maxed out. The numbers swirled in her head constantly, always adding up to not enough. Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Tap, tap, tap. The sound pulled her back. She opened her eyes but saw no one at the counter. Tap, tap, tap. Lower this time. Sarah leaned over the counter and looked down. A small dirty hand was reaching up, barely clearing the edge, holding a single nickel, tapping it against the laminate with desperate hope. Sarah came around the counter and knelt down. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, stood there looking up at her. He'd been standing outside under the awning for nearly 10 minutes, staring through the window before finally stepping inside. His sandy brown hair stuck up in all directions, matted with dirt and sweat. His face was smudged, streaked with grime. A polo shirt and khaki pants that must have been nice once, but were now wrinkled, stained and obviously unwashed for days. He had that particular smell of someone who'd been living rough: sweat, dirt, dust and something else. Fear maybe, or desperation. But it was his eyes that grabbed Sarah's heart and squeezed. Big hazel eyes that held a mixture of hope and exhaustion that no child should ever know. Eyes that had seen too much. Eyes that expected rejection but were begging for mercy. "Hi there, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, instinctively making her voice gentle. "What's your name?" The boy didn't answer right away. He just stared at her, clutching that nickel like it was made of gold, like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet Sarah had to lean in to hear. The words came out halting, unsure. I'm really hungry." 3 words. That's all it took to shatter Sarah's heart into 1,000 pieces. The boy held up the nickel with a trembling hand. His fingers were dirty, the nails ragged. "Can I get some food?" With this, Sarah looked at that single coin. 5 cents, it wouldn't buy anything in this diner. The cheapest item on the menu was $1.50 for a cup of soup. But looking at this child's face, the hollowness in his cheeks, the way his clothes hung loose on his thin frame, the desperate, pleading hope in those eyes, she knew he was starving. Not just hungry, starving. She couldn't turn him away. Her body physically rejected the idea. But she also couldn't give away free food. Mr. Patterson had made that crystal clear more times than she could count. His voice echoed in her head. Every freebie comes out of our profit margin, Mitchell. You give something away for free, you're fired. No warnings, no second chances. Sarah felt a small tug on her uniform. She looked down to find the boy staring up at her, his lower lip trembling, his eyes filling with tears he was trying desperately to hold back. Is it not enough? He whispered, and she could hear him fighting not to cry. I won't get anything. In that moment, Sarah was 8 years old again, standing in a soup kitchen line with her mother after they'd been evicted. She remembered the gnawing, cramping hunger that made everything else fade away, the shame of having to ask strangers for help, the terror of being turned away. She remembered what it felt like to be small and powerless and so hungry that it hurt to breathe. Her mind screamed no. Rent was due, she couldn't afford to lose this job, the only thing keeping her from eviction. Her parents were counting on her. But then the boy's stomach growled, a small broken sound, and her heart cracked. Some prices, she realized, were worth paying, even if it meant risking everything. Her hand moved to her apron pocket before her brain could catch up completely. Her tip jar. She'd been saving tips all week for groceries, $23.50. Not much, but it was hers. Sarah made a decision, one that would change everything. She glanced around the diner quickly. Mr. Patterson was in his office at the back, door closed, probably doing the end-of-day paperwork like he did every Thursday afternoon. Jerry, the cook, was in the back room taking his break. She could hear him humming faintly. The one other customer in the diner was absorbed in his newspaper in a corner booth, not paying attention to anything else. You know what? Sarah said, looking back at the boy with a smile, a real one this time, not the fake customer service smile she'd been wearing all day. That's exactly enough for some hot, delicious fried chicken. The best we've got. How does that sound? The boy's eyes went wide, his mouth falling open slightly. Really, Sarah said firmly, even though her hands were starting to shake. She gently took the nickel from his small hand, it was warm from being clutched so tightly, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she pulled out her tip money. Why don't you sit right here at this table by the window, okay? I'll bring your food out in just a minute, it'll be nice and hot. The boy nodded slowly, moving to the table but never taking his eyes off her, like he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away. Sarah straightened up and walked behind the counter. Since the boy wasn't at a numbered table, she quickly entered a fake order number into the register, fried chicken dinner special, and fed dollar bills from her tip money into the till. $7.50. That's what a full meal would cost after tax. She hit the button to complete the transaction and printed the receipt, tucking it into her pocket without a second thought. The transaction was logged in the system, but she didn't realize the risk of the fake order code until later. Sarah moved quickly to the kitchen, trying not to look rushed or suspicious. She grabbed a to-go container and started filling it. 2 pieces of crispy fried chicken. She couldn't help herself, she grabbed the best pieces. A generous scoop of mashed potatoes with a ladle of gravy, green beans. A fluffy buttermilk biscuit. She paused, looked around, then added a chocolate chip cookie from the dessert case. If she was doing this, she was going to do it right. This child was going to have a real meal. A good meal. When she came back out, the boy was right where she'd left him, sitting very still at the table, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes tracking her every movement like a small animal watching for danger. Sarah walked over and set the container down in front of him. There you go, sweetheart. Careful, it's hot. For a moment the boy just stared at the food, like he couldn't believe it was real, like he thought it might disappear if he blinked. Then without warning, he threw his thin arms around Sarah's waist and hugged her with surprising strength. She felt wetness on her uniform and realized he was crying, silent tears streaming down his dirty face, his small body shaking with the force of suppressed sobs. Thank you, he whispered, his voice choked and thick. Thank you. Sarah knelt down and hugged him back properly, her own eyes burning with tears. You're welcome, honey, you're so welcome. Now you eat, okay? Eat every bite. The boy nodded and pulled back, wiping his eyes with dirty hands, smearing the tears and grime across his face. He opened the container and grabbed a piece of chicken with both hands, biting into it like he hadn't eaten in days. Which, Sarah realized with a sick hollow feeling in her stomach, he probably hadn't. She should have walked away then. Should have gone back behind the counter and let him eat in peace. But something stopped her. This child, alone, dirty, desperate, starving, rang every alarm bell in her mind. Where were his parents? Why was he out here by himself? How long had he been on the streets? What had happened to him? Sarah glanced toward Mr. Patterson's office. The door was still closed. She could see his shadow moving past the frosted glass window. He was still busy. She made another decision, sat down across from the boy at the table. "Sweetheart," she said gently, keeping her voice soft and non-threatening. "I need to ask you something. What's your name?" The boy looked up from his chicken, his cheeks full of food. He chewed quickly and swallowed, then said quietly, "Tommy." "Hi, Tommy. I'm Sarah." She gave him her warmest smile. "Tommy, I want to help you. But I need to know, where are your parents? Where's your mom or dad?" Tommy's face crumpled slightly. His hands stilled on the food. Fresh tears threatened to spill over. "Tommy, you're not in trouble," Sarah said quickly, reaching across the table but not quite touching him, not wanting to spook him. "I'm not mad, and nobody's mad. I just want to make sure you're safe. Are you lost? Did you get separated from your family?" Tommy shook his head slowly, looking down at his lap. "Then did you run away?" A tiny nod. So small Sarah almost missed it. Her heart sank. "Oh, sweetheart. Why? Can you tell me why you ran away?" For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then the words started coming, tumbling out in a broken, halting rush, like a dam finally breaking after too much pressure. "He doesn't talk anymore," Tommy whispered. "Just works, and yells sometimes. Mom's gone and I think it's my fault. Maybe he's mad, 'cause I cry too much. I miss her. I try to tell him but he gets angry. Says he got real stuff to worry about. So I left. Thought maybe he'd be happy without me there." Sarah felt like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart with an iron fist. This little boy, grieving his mother, desperate for his father's love, had run away because he thought he was the problem. "Oh, Tommy," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. She reached across the table and took his small, dirty hand in both of hers. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not the problem, do you hear me? You're not." Tommy looked up at her with those heartbreaking eyes. "You're a little boy who lost his mother," Sarah continued, speaking slowly and clearly, making sure every word landed. "And you needed your father. That's not being a problem. That's not being a burden. That's being human. That's being a child who's hurting and needs love." "But he said, your dad made a mistake," Sarah interrupted gently. "A big mistake. But Tommy, I promise you, he doesn't hate you. He's not angry at you. He's probably angry at the world for taking your mom away. He's probably so sad inside that he doesn't know how to show you that he's sad too. Sometimes grown-ups get so caught up in their own pain that they can't see their children's pain. But that doesn't mean they don't love you." Tommy's lip trembled. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Sarah said firmly. "And Tommy, I also know this right now somewhere out there, your dad is terrified. He's looking for you. He's probably not sleeping, not eating, just searching everywhere, praying that you're okay. That's what parents do when their children are missing. They don't give up. They don't stop looking." "Really?" Tommy's voice was so small, so fragile, so full of desperate hope. "Really, Mitchell?" The voice cracked through the diner like a whip. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked up to find Mr. Patterson standing there, arms crossed over his barrel chest, his face bright red with fury. "Oh God. Oh no. Sir, I can explain." "Explain what?" Patterson's voice rose sharp and cutting. "Explain why you're sitting on your ass during your shift. Explain why you're chatting with some street kid instead of working. Explain why you're turning my diner into a homeless shelter." Sarah stood quickly, instinctively placing herself between Patterson and Tommy. "Sir, please, he was just hungry." "I don't care if he was dying," Patterson shouted. "This is a business, not a charity. You don't sit down on the job. You don't serve people who can't pay." "I paid for it," Sarah said quickly, her voice shaking. "I paid for his meal with my own money. I put it through the register. It's not a freebie." Patterson's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Let me see the receipt." Sarah pulled the receipt from her pocket and handed it over, her hand trembling slightly. Patterson scanned it, his scowl deepening. You processed this under a fake order number. That's falsifying records. You're done. Please, Mr. Patterson. Sarah heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. Please, I have rent due. I can't lose this job. I'll work extra shifts. Should have thought about that before you decided to play Mother Teresa on my time, Patterson said coldly. You're done. Now get out before I call the police and have both of you removed. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of this cruel man. She looked down at Tommy, who had gone very pale and very still, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. It's okay, sweetheart, Sarah said softly, her voice steadier than she felt. You finish eating. I just need to get my things. She walked to the back room on shaking legs. The small space smelled like grease and old coffee. Her tip jars sat on the shelf above her locker, now with only $16 left after paying for Tommy's meal. Money she'd been saving for groceries this week. She grabbed it all, along with her purse and jacket. When she walked back out, Tommy was still sitting at the table, the food container in front of him, looking small and scared and drowning in guilt. Mr. Patterson had retreated to his office, but was watching through the window, his arms still crossed, his expression cold. Sarah approached Tommy. Come on, honey, let's go outside. This is my fault, Tommy whispered, his voice breaking. You lost your job because of me. No, Sarah said firmly, kneeling down so she was eye level with him. She put her hands on his thin shoulders. Listen to me, Tommy. This is not your fault. Don't you ever think that. You needed help, and I helped you. That's what people are supposed to do for each other. What he did. She glanced toward Patterson's office. That's wrong. What I did was right. Do you understand? Tommy nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. Now come with me, Sarah said, standing and taking his hand. Bring your food. We're leaving. They walked out of Rosie's diner together, into the sunny Portland afternoon. The sunlight warmed the sidewalks, and the streets bustled with life. Sarah could feel the heat on her skin, could feel the warmth starting to lift her spirits slightly, but she barely noticed. She just lost her job. The only thing standing between her and eviction. The only income she had to help her parents, to survive, to keep going. She'd lost it because she'd fed a hungry child. And somehow, impossibly, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Where are we going? Tommy asked quietly, still holding tight to his food container with one hand and Sarah's hand with the other. Somewhere safe, Sarah said. Though she wasn't entirely sure where that was, she just knew they couldn't stay here. Not with Patterson threatening to call the police. Not with Tommy scared and vulnerable. She thought quickly. There's a park, a couple blocks from here. We can sit there while you finish eating, and we'll figure out what to do next. Okay? Tommy nodded, and they started walking through the sun-warmed streets of Portland. Sarah kept glancing down at the boy beside her. This small, brave, broken child, who'd been surviving on the streets, who'd walked into a diner with a single nickel and a desperate hope. As they walked, Sarah's mind raced. She'd lost her job. She was facing eviction. Her future had never been more uncertain. But looking down at Tommy's small hand in hers, at the way he clutched that food container like it was precious, and it was, it absolutely was, she felt something unexpected. Not regret, not anger, just a bone-deep certainty that she'd done the right thing, that some things mattered more than jobs, or money, or security. That kindness, real kindness, was worth the cost, even if that cost was everything. They reached Riverside Park, a few minutes later, a small patch of grass with some benches, a rusty swing set, and a few trees casting dappled shadows in the sunlight. It wasn't much, but it was better than standing on the street. Sarah led Tommy to a bench under one of the trees, away from the street, but visible enough to feel safe. They sat down, and Sarah immediately draped her jacket over Tommy's shoulders despite the warmth. He was shivering from fear, or exhaustion, she couldn't tell. Here, she said, just in case, and keep eating, okay? Tommy nodded and opened the container again, taking smaller bites now, like he was savoring it, like he wanted it to last. Sarah watched him eat, and felt her heart breaking all over again. How long had it been since someone had fed this child? How long had he been out here alone? Tommy, she said gently, can you tell me more about what happened? About why you ran away? Tommy was quiet for a long moment, chewing slowly, his eyes fixed on the food. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the sound of birds chirping nearby. Mom died 6 months ago. Cancer. It was really fast. She was sick, and then she was in the hospital, and then she was— He swallowed hard. She was gone. And Dad just stopped being Dad. Sarah listened, not interrupting, letting Tommy tell his story at his own pace. He doesn't smile, doesn't talk much, goes to work early, comes home late. When he's home, he just sits, stares at nothing. I try to tell him I miss Mom, about stuff I remember, but he looks like it hurts him, like I'm making it bad. Tommy's voice cracked, and then one night, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, I was crying 'cause I found Mom's scarf. It still smells like her, and Dad came in. I thought maybe he'd hug me, but he got mad, really mad, said he didn't have time. Said he had real problems, said be strong, stop crying about stuff we can't fix. Tears were streaming down Tommy's face, glistening in the sunlight, and I just thought he didn't want me, that I'm making everything harder. Maybe if I'm gone, he can be okay. So I took some money from his wallet, just a little, and I left. That was 3 or 4 days ago. 3 or 4 days, this 8-year-old child had been surviving on the streets for 3 or 4 days. Oh Tommy, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Where have you been staying? Different places. Tommy wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Under a bridge one night, but it was scary. There's an old tool shed behind a church. I stayed there a few times, wherever I could find. I used the money for food at first, but it ran out. That nickel it was all I had left. I found it on the ground yesterday. Sarah felt like she might be sick. 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 days of this child, sleeping rough, going hungry, being terrified, and alone, all because his father, consumed by his own grief, couldn't see his son's pain. She reached out and took Tommy's hand again. Tommy, your dad was wrong. So wrong. What he said to you, that was cruel and unfair, and not true. But I need you to understand something. He didn't mean it. How do you know? Tommy asked, his voice small. Because I know what grief looks like. Sarah said quietly, I've seen it before. Sometimes when people lose someone they love, they hurt so much inside that they can't handle anyone else's hurt too. It's not right, and it's not fair, but it happens. Your dad wasn't angry at you, Tommy. He was angry at the world for taking your mom. He was probably angry at himself for not being able to save her. And when you tried to talk about her, it reminded him of all that pain, and he just shut down. Tommy looked at her with those big hopeful eyes. So he doesn't hate me. He absolutely does not hate you, Sarah said firmly. And right now, I guarantee you, he's terrified. He's probably called the police. He's probably looking for you everywhere. He's probably not sleeping, not eating, just searching and praying that you're safe. Really? Tommy's voice held such desperate hope that it physically hurt to hear. Really, Tommy? I need to call the police. We need to help them find your dad and get you home safe. No. Tommy grabbed her arm, panic flooding his face. Please don't. They'll be mad at me for running away. They'll put me in jail or take me away. Whoa, stop, Sarah said gently, putting her hands on his shoulders. Tommy, look at me. The police aren't going to be mad at you. They're not going to put you in jail. You're 8 years old, and you've been missing. They're going to be relieved you're safe. Their job is to help kids like you get home to their families. That's it. Tommy still looked terrified, his whole body trembling. I promise you, Sarah continued, I will stay with you the whole time. I won't leave you alone. And if your dad doesn't want you back, which I don't believe for a second, but then I'll make sure someone who cares is there for you. Okay? Tommy searched her face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Okay? Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She was warm from the sun, exhausted, unemployed, and about to call the police to report a missing child she'd just met. This was either the best decision she'd ever made, or the worst. But looking at Tommy, at his thin face and hopeful eyes, and the way he trusted her, she knew she had no choice. She dialed 911. Her heart pounded as it rang. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm at Riverside Park on 3rd Avenue. I have a child with me who's been missing. His name is Tommy Hayes. He's 8 years old, and he's been gone from home for 3 or 4 days. He's safe with me right now, but he needs to be reunited with his father. Can you describe the child?
Sarah described Tommy, while he sat beside her, listening with wide eyes, still eating his food slowly, making it last. It took nearly 15 minutes, filled with questions, his age, what he was wearing, how they'd met, before the dispatcher said help was on the way. "Ma'am, we have an active missing child case for Thomas Hayes, age 8, reported missing 3 or 4 days ago by his father, Robert Hayes. Officers are being dispatched to your location immediately. Please remain where you are. Are you in any danger? Is the child injured?" "No, we're safe. He's okay. Just tired and hungry, but okay. Officers will be there in approximately 10 minutes. Please stay on the line." Sarah held the phone to her ear with one hand and put her other arm around Tommy's shoulders. "See," she said softly. "Your dad reported you missing. He's been looking for you this whole time." "He has?" Tommy's voice was small and wondering. "He has? The police said there's been an active search for you since the first day. Your dad never stopped looking, Tommy. Never." Tommy started crying again, but this time the tears seemed different. Not fear or guilt, but relief, hope. They sat together on that bench in the sunshine, Sarah keeping Tommy close with her arm around him, talking quietly about nothing important. School, favorite foods, the park, anything to keep him calm and distracted while they waited. By the time the police car pulled up, the sunlight had softened into late afternoon gold.
True to the dispatcher's word, a police car pulled up exactly 10 minutes later, lights flashing but no siren. 2 officers got out, a woman with kind eyes and a man with gray hair. "Hi there," the female officer said, approaching slowly with her hands visible, her posture non-threatening. She knelt down to Tommy's level. "You must be Tommy. I'm Officer Martinez, and this is Officer Reed. We've been looking all over for you, sweetheart. Your dad's been so worried." Tommy pressed closer to Sarah, still uncertain despite her reassurances. "It's okay," Sarah murmured. "They're here to help." Officer Martinez looked at Sarah. "You're the woman who called?" "Yes, Sarah Mitchell. Tommy came into the diner where I worked and I gave him food. Then we came here so he could eat and we could figure out what to do." Officer Reed was already on his radio. "Dispatch, we have the missing child, Thomas Hayes. He's safe and unharmed. Please contact Robert Hayes immediately and give him our location. Have him meet us at Riverside Park, 3rd Avenue entrance." There was a crackle of static, then an excited voice. "Roger that. Father has been calling daily for updates. Contacting him now. ETA approximately 20 to 25 minutes depending on traffic." Officer Martinez smiled at Tommy. "See, your dad's on his way. He's going to be so happy you're safe. Is he going to be mad?" Tommy asked in a small voice. "Mad?" Officer Reed shook his head. "Son, your father has been out of his mind with worry. He's organized search parties, put up flyers all over Portland, called us every single day asking if we'd found you yet. That man hasn't given up hope for 1 second. The only thing he's going to be is grateful you're alive and safe." Tommy's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time Sarah could see a flicker of hope in them too. Officer Martinez brought a bottle of water from the patrol car and offered it to Tommy, along with a granola bar from her pocket. They talked quietly, asking gentle questions about where he'd been, if anyone had hurt him, making sure he was okay. By the time headlights swept the park, Tommy had curled up against Sarah's side, half asleep, the cookie still clutched in his hand. Sarah sat nearby, watching, feeling oddly out of place now that the professionals were here. Her job was done. She'd helped Tommy. She'd called the police. He'd called the police. Soon his father would arrive and take him home, and Sarah would go back to her life, her jobless, soon-to-be homeless life. But at least she'd done something good. At least she'd made a difference for one child on one sunny afternoon. The minutes ticked by slowly. 15, 20, 23. Then they heard it. The sound of a car approaching too fast, tires squealing slightly as it took the corner. Headlights swept across the park as a sedan came to an abrupt stop at the entrance, the driver's door flying open before the engine was even fully off. A man stumbled out and started running toward them. He'd been working with local officers, checking parks and shelters every day. When dispatch called, he drove straight there. Sarah's breath caught at the sight of him. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-30s, but he looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 3 or 4 days. His clothes were wrinkled and stained, jeans and a rumpled button-down shirt that looked like he'd been wearing them for days. His hair was uncombed and wild, sticking up in all directions. His face was covered in patchy stubble that was more neglect than style. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, with deep, dark circles underneath that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry. He looked gaunt, hollow, barely held together. But when his eyes found Tommy sitting there under the tree, his entire face transformed, crumbled, broke open with relief and joy and overwhelming, desperate love. "Tommy," he gasped, his voice cracking on the name like it was being torn from his chest. "Dad," Tommy whispered, stirring from his half-sleep, and then he was scrambling up from the bench, the jacket falling away. And then Robert Hayes was running, stumbling, falling to his knees on the grass and catching his son in his arms with desperate, trembling strength. He was sobbing, great, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body as he held Tommy like he'd never let go, like he was afraid this might be a dream that would dissolve if he loosened his grip even slightly. "Oh God, Tommy, oh God, oh God, oh God." Robert's voice was broken, raw with emotion. "I thought I'd lost you forever. I thought you were dead. I thought I'd never see you again." He pulled back just enough to look at Tommy's face, his shaking hands touching Tommy's cheeks, his hair, his shoulders, like he needed to confirm this was real, that his son was really here, alive and breathing. "I'm sorry," Tommy said, his own tears flowing freely. "I'm sorry I ran away. I'm sorry I was a problem." "No," Robert said fiercely, his voice thick with tears. "No, no, you are not a problem. You have never been a problem. You are my son. You are the most important thing in my entire world, and I failed you. I failed you so badly." His voice broke completely. "I was so caught up in my own pain that I couldn't see yours. I made you feel like your feelings didn't matter, like you didn't matter, and that is the worst thing I have ever done in my life. You needed your father and I wasn't there. That's on me, Tommy. Not you, never ever you. But you said," Tommy's voice was small, confused, "you said you didn't want to talk about Mom. I thought you hated her. Or hated me for reminding you." Robert made a sound like he'd been punched. He pulled Tommy back into a fierce embrace, his whole body shaking. "I didn't hate her. Oh buddy, I could never hate her, and I could never hate you. I loved your mom more than anything in this world, except you. And when she died," he had to stop, overcome with emotion. Sarah found herself crying silently, watching this reunion, her hand pressed to her mouth. Robert took a shuddering breath and continued, his voice raw. "When she died, a part of me died with her. And I didn't know how to keep living with this giant empty hole inside me. Every time you tried to talk about her, it reminded me of everything I'd lost, and I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the pain, so I shut down. I shut you out, and that was so wrong." He pulled back to look at Tommy's face again, his own face wet with tears. "I didn't hate talking about your mom. I was drowning, Tommy. And instead of letting you help me, instead of helping you, I pushed you away. That's my failure, my shame. Not yours." "I miss her," Tommy whispered. "I miss her so much." "I miss her too," Robert said, his voice breaking. "Every single day, every single moment. But you know what I realized these past 3 or 4 days?" He cupped Tommy's face gently in his hands. "Losing you would have been worse, so much worse, because you're not just a reminder of your mom. You're your own person. You're brave and smart and kind, and you're the best thing that ever happened to me. You're the reason I have to keep going." "Really?" Tommy's voice was so small, so fragile, so full of desperate need to believe. "Really?" Robert said firmly, then pulled Tommy back into his arms. "From now on we talk about her whenever you want, as much as you want. We remember her together. We cry together if we need to. We help each other heal. I promise you, Tommy, I swear on everything I have left, I will never ever make you feel alone like that again." They held each other, both crying, both shaking, while everyone else stood back and watched with tears in their own eyes. This was more than a reunion. This was a father and son finding their way back to each other, breaking through walls of grief and misunderstanding to reach the love that had always been there underneath. Officer Martinez wiped her eyes. Officer Reed cleared his throat roughly and looked away. And Sarah felt like she was witnessing something sacred, something private and profound, that she had no right to intrude upon. Finally, Robert seemed to remember they weren't alone. He stood slowly, lifting Tommy with him. Tommy immediately wrapped his arms and legs around his father, clinging like he was afraid to let go, burying his face in Robert's neck. Robert's eyes found Sarah. He looked at her for a long moment, taking in her worn uniform, her tousled hair, the exhaustion etched in her face, the tears on her cheeks. "You," he said, his voice hoarse. "Officer Martinez told me while I was on my way here. You're Sarah. You're the one who found him." Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice. Robert walked toward her, still holding Tommy, his eyes never leaving her face. "Tommy told the officers what happened, that he came into your diner with only a nickel, that you gave him a real meal, that you sat with him and talked to him, that you lost your job because of it, that instead of just sending him away after that, you brought him here and called the police, that you stayed with him until we could get here." He stopped in front of her, and Sarah could see he was trembling, from emotion, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming relief of having his son back. "You saved my son's life," Robert said, his voice thick. "Not just physically, though God knows what could have happened to an 8-year-old alone on these streets for 3 or 4 days, but emotionally. Tommy told the officers you said he wasn't the problem, that I was probably looking for him, that I loved him. You gave him back hope when he'd lost it." His voice cracked. "And you did all of that after losing your job because you chose to help him. You had every reason to look the other way, to protect yourself, but you didn't. You chose my son over your own security." "I just did what anyone should do," Sarah managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "But not what everyone would do," Robert said firmly. "Most people would have turned away, called the police maybe, but not gotten involved, not risked their job, not stayed with him, comforted him, made him feel like he mattered." He shifted Tommy slightly in his arms. "What's your full name?" "Sarah Mitchell." "Miss Mitchell, Miss Mitchell, I don't know how to thank you. Words seem completely inadequate for what you've done. You gave me back everything that matters. You saved my son, you saved me. You showed both of us that good people still exist in this world." Sarah felt fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Just take care of him. That's all the thanks I need. Love him, listen to him. Be there for him." "I will," Robert promised, his voice fierce with determination. "Every single day for the rest of my life, I will be the father he deserves, the father I should have been all along." He looked down at Tommy. "Say thank you to Miss Sarah." Tommy lifted his head from his father's shoulder and reached out to touch Sarah's hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice stronger now, steadier. "You really are an angel. That's what I told the police officers, that an angel gave me food when I was hungry." Sarah took his small hand and squeezed it gently. "You're very welcome, sweetheart. You be good for your dad, okay? And remember, you're not a problem. You're a blessing. You're loved." "I'll remember," Tommy whispered, then tucked his head back against his father's shoulder. Robert looked at Sarah with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in months. "Miss Mitchell, the officers mentioned that you lost your job today, because of helping Tommy." Sarah's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, but it was worth it. It shouldn't have cost you anything," Robert said, anger flickering in his eyes, not at her but on her behalf. "You did something right, something good, and you were punished for it. That's not justice." He paused, seeming to struggle with something, then reached awkwardly into his pocket, while still holding Tommy. He pulled out a somewhat battered business card. "This has my contact information. Please call me, tomorrow, or the next day whenever. I want to help you. I need to help you. You gave me back everything that matters. The least I can do is try to help you get back on your feet." "Mr. Hayes, you don't owe me anything. I owe you everything," Robert interrupted, his eyes intense despite the exhaustion written all over his face. "My son. My second chance to be the father he needs. My whole world. Please, take the card, call me, let me at least try to help." Sarah took the card because refusing seemed ungracious, and because deep down in a place she barely wanted to acknowledge, she was desperate enough to consider it. "I will, thank you." "No," Robert said softly, "thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Then he did something that surprised her. He reached out with his free hand and squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're a good person, Sarah Mitchell, a truly good person. The world needs more people like you." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, we should get Tommy checked out at the hospital, just to make sure he's okay. And we'll need to file some paperwork about where he's been, make sure he's not injured." "Of course," Robert said immediately. "Whatever you need." He looked back at Sarah one more time. "Please call me, promise, I promise."
Sarah said quietly. She watched as Robert carried Tommy to his car, a nice sedan that looked like it hadn't been washed in over a week. The back seat was visible through the windows, filled with coffee cups, fast food wrappers, blankets, clothes, the car of a man who'd been living in it, searching constantly, refusing to give up. Robert buckled Tommy carefully into the back seat, still touching him constantly, his hair, his shoulder, his hand, like he needed the physical reassurance that his son was really there. Then he got in the driver's seat and followed the police car out of the park, toward the hospital. Sarah stood alone in Riverside Park as the sun continued to shine. The streetlights weren't needed yet, but the warmth lingered in the air. She was overheated slightly, exhausted, unemployed, facing eviction in less than 3 days. But somehow, impossibly, standing there in the sunlight, having just watched a father and son reunite, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She'd lost her job, she'd lost her security, but she'd helped save a child, she'd helped heal a family. She'd chosen compassion over self-preservation, kindness over convenience, and that mattered. That meant something. Sarah looked down at the business card in her hand, now slightly warm from the sun. Robert Hayes, senior software engineer and technology consultant, a phone number, an email address. She slipped it into her pocket and started the long walk home through the sunlit streets of Portland. Her apartment would be stuffy and empty and full of problems she didn't know how to solve. But for today, for right now, she could rest in the knowledge that she'd done the right thing, that she'd been someone's angel on a desperate afternoon. And somehow, that felt like enough. Sarah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tommy's face, the desperation when he'd held up that nickel, the relief when she'd given him food, the hope when his father had finally held him. She saw Robert's hollow eyes and trembling hands, saw the way he'd clutched Tommy like he'd never let go. She'd done the right thing. She knew that with absolute certainty, but lying in her narrow bed at 3 in the morning, staring at the water-stained ceiling, the knowledge didn't make her situation any less terrifying. No job, rent due in 2 days, no prospects, no safety net. She dragged herself out of bed at 6 a.m. and forced herself to shower, to get dressed, to put on shoes and go outside. She had to do something. Couldn't just sit in her apartment and wait for disaster. Sarah spent the morning walking the streets of Portland, going business to business, asking if anyone needed help, any help. Temporary work, day labor, cleaning, stocking, anything. Most places said no before she even finished asking. Some took her name and number with the hollow promise of "we'll call if something opens up." One restaurant owner looked at her with pity and said, "Times are tough, honey, wish I could help." By noon she'd walked for 6 hours and had nothing to show for it but blistered feet and crushed hope. She bought a cheap sandwich from a convenience store. Her budget was now so tight that even $3 felt like a luxury, and sat on a bench to eat it. The sandwich tasted like cardboard, but she forced herself to swallow every bite. She couldn't afford to waste food. Her phone rang. Unknown number, probably a spam call, but she answered anyway. What did she have to lose? "Hello, Miss Mitchell, Sarah? This is Detective Morrison with the Portland Police Department." Sarah's heart started pounding. Had something happened to Tommy? Is everything okay? "Everything's fine," the detective assured her quickly. "Tommy's home safe with his father. The hospital cleared him yesterday, minor dehydration and some cuts and scrapes, but overall he's in good shape considering what he's been through." Sarah felt relief flood through her. "That's good. That's really good. I'm actually calling because Officer Martinez mentioned your situation, that you lost your job yesterday because you helped Tommy. I wanted to let you know that we filed a detailed report documenting your actions, and if you need any kind of reference or statement for future employers, the department would be happy to provide it." "Oh," Sarah said, surprised and touched. "Thank you. That's very kind. It's the least we can do. What you did yesterday was remarkable, Miss Mitchell. You kept a vulnerable child safe and helped reunite a family. That matters. I hope your future employers see that." After they hung up, Sarah sat on the bench feeling slightly less hopeless. A reference from the police department wouldn't pay her rent, but it was something. A small piece of evidence that she'd done the right thing, that her kindness had value. She spent the afternoon applying to more jobs online, sending her resume into the void, and hoping someone, anyone, would respond. By evening, she'd applied to 37 positions and hadn't heard back from any of them. Her phone rang again around 6 p.m. Her mother, "Baby girl, I had the strangest feeling that something happened. Are you okay?" Sarah hadn't planned to tell her parents yet, didn't want them to worry, but hearing her mother's voice broke something open inside her. The whole story came tumbling out: Tommy, the food, getting fired, the reunion, the uncertainty of what came next. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mama," Sarah said, suddenly worried, "are you still there?" "I'm here, baby." Diane's voice was thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you." "Proud?" Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "Mama, I lost my job. I'm about to be evicted. How can you be proud?" "Because you did what was right even when it cost you everything," Diane said firmly. "That little boy was hungry and scared, and you helped him. You didn't think about yourself, you thought about a child who needed you. That's who I raised you to be. That's who your grandmother raised me to be." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. "But what am I going to do? I have 2 days to come up with $1,800 I don't have." "We'll figure it out," Diane said. "Your father and I have a little bit saved. It's not much, but no," Sarah interrupted. "Mama, you can't. You need that money for Dad's medications, and we'll manage," Diane said firmly. "Family helps family, Sarah. That's how it works. Let us help." They talked for another hour, her mother's voice steady and reassuring, helping Sarah feel slightly less alone, slightly less terrified. When they finally hung up, Sarah felt fractionally better. Not good, not okay, but less drowning. The next day followed the same pattern: walking, asking, applying, getting rejected or ignored. She found one temp job, unloading a delivery truck for $30 cash. 4 hours of back-breaking labor that left her hands blistered and her back screaming, but she'd earned money. $30, she needed $1,800. That evening, sitting in her apartment, eating ramen noodles because they were cheap and filling, Sarah pulled out Robert's business card. She'd been carrying it in her pocket, taking it out occasionally to look at it, then putting it back without calling. What would she even say? "Hi, remember me? I helped your son, and now I need help myself." It felt too much like asking for charity, like taking advantage of gratitude. But she'd promised to call, and Robert had seemed genuinely sincere when he'd asked her to. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah dialed the number. It rang twice before a tired voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Hayes, this is Sarah Mitchell. I don't know if you remember, Sarah." Robert's voice immediately warmed, became more alert. "Of course I remember. I'm so glad you called. How are you?" The simple question, asked with genuine care, nearly undid her. "I'm managing," she said, not quite able to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Sarah," Robert said gently, "it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to pretend with me." And somehow, that permission broke the dam. Sarah found herself telling him everything: the job search, the temp work, the impossible math of trying to come up with money, the fear that kept her awake at night. Robert listened without interrupting, and when she finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" he said finally. "About these past 2 days, okay. Tommy and I spent yesterday at home, just the two of us, talking, really talking. For the first time since Linda, my wife, died. He told me everything he's been feeling, all the fear and confusion and pain he's been carrying, and I told him about my grief, about how losing his mother broke something in me, about how sorry I am that I let that brokenness hurt him." Robert's voice grew thick. "We cried together. We looked at photos of Linda, and told stories about her. We remembered the good times, and Tommy told me something that's been replaying in my head ever since." "What did he say?" "He said, the angel lady told me you still loved me, that you were just too sad to show it. She said, you were probably looking for me everywhere. And she was right, Dad, about all of it." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You gave my son back hope when he'd lost it," Robert continued. "You saw through his hurt to what he really needed, not just food, but someone to tell him he mattered, that he wasn't the problem, that he was loved." His voice cracked. "You did in one afternoon what I should have been doing for months. You showed him basic human kindness when he needed it most, and that changed everything." "I'm glad he's home," Sarah said softly. "That's all I wanted. I know, but Sarah, you're in trouble now because of that choice, and I won't just walk away knowing you're suffering because you saved my son. Mr. Hayes, Robert, please. Robert, I didn't help Tommy expecting anything in return. I don't want you to feel obligated. This isn't about obligation, Robert interrupted gently. It's about gratitude. It's about recognizing that good people deserve good things. It's about, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. It's about wanting to help someone who helped me when I didn't deserve it. You do deserve it. Tommy deserves his father. Maybe now, but a week ago, I was failing him completely. I was so consumed by my own pain that I couldn't see his. You broke through that, Sarah. You made me see what I was doing. You gave me a second chance to be the father my son needs. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. Listen, Robert continued. I know we've just met. I know this might seem strange, but would you be willing to meet with me for coffee tomorrow, just to talk? I have something I want to discuss with you, and I'd rather do it in person. Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part, the part that had been burned before, that had learned to be cautious, held back. What do you want to discuss? She asked. A possibility, Robert said. A way I might be able to help you, but I don't want to get into it over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? 2 o'clock at the Daily Grind on 4th Avenue. Sarah thought about it. What did she have to lose? If nothing else, she'd get a cup of coffee and a conversation with someone who seemed to genuinely care. Okay, she said. I'll be there. Thank you, Robert said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. Thank you, Sarah. I'll see you tomorrow. That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking about the past 3 or 4 days. How quickly life could change. How one choice, feeding a hungry child, could set off a chain of events that altered everything. She thought about Tommy, hopefully safe in his bed now, no longer sleeping under bridges or in tool sheds. She thought about Robert, learning to be a father again, learning to grieve with his son instead of apart from him. And she thought about herself, jobless, nearly homeless, terrified of the future, but somehow still standing, still making choices, still choosing kindness even when it cost her. Her mother's words echoed in her head. Do good, baby girl, and good will find its way back to you. Maybe it really was that simple, or maybe it wasn't simple at all, but worth it anyway. Tomorrow she'd meet with Robert and find out what he wanted to discuss. Tonight she'd rest as well as she could, knowing that she'd done the right thing, that she'd been someone's angel on a desperate afternoon, and somehow, impossibly, that still felt like enough.
The Daily Grind was a cozy coffee shop with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local artwork. The smell of fresh roasted beans filled the air, and soft jazz played from speakers mounted in the corners. Sarah arrived 5 minutes early, her stomach twisting with nervous anticipation. She spotted Robert immediately. He sat at a corner table, 2 coffee cups already in front of him. He looked different than he had 3 nights ago, showered, shaved, wearing clean clothes. But the shadows under his eyes remained, testimony to sleepless nights that couldn't be erased in just a few days. When he saw her, he stood and offered a genuine smile. Sarah, thank you for coming. Of course, she said, sitting down across from him. Is that for me? Black coffee. I hope that's okay. I realized after I ordered that I should have asked how you take it. Black is perfect, Sarah said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Thank you. They sat in slightly awkward silence for a moment. Robert seemed to be gathering his thoughts, choosing his words carefully. How's Tommy? Sarah asked, breaking the silence. Robert's face immediately softened. He's good, really good actually, better than I dared hope. We had our first therapy session yesterday, both of us together. The therapist said we're going to need time, but she's optimistic. Tommy's resilient, and now that we're actually talking to each other, his voice grew thick. Now that he knows I love him, that I want to hear about his mom, that his feelings matter, it's like watching him come back to life. I'm so glad, Sarah said sincerely. He asks about you, Robert said, calls you the angel lady, wants to know if you're okay, if you got a new job. He feels guilty that you lost yours because of him. Please tell him it's not his fault, Sarah said quickly, that I'd make the same choice again. I will. Robert took a sip of his coffee, then set it down and looked at her directly. Sarah, I need to tell you some things about myself, about my past, and then I want to propose something. Will you hear me out? Okay. Robert took a deep breath and began. 3 years ago, I built a technology company from nothing. cybersecurity solutions for businesses. I was good at it, had a knack for both the technical side and the business side. The company grew fast. Within 2 years we were doing millions in revenue. He paused, pain flickering across his face. I brought in my brother-in-law, Linda's brother Daniel, as a partner. We were family. I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. Sarah listened, not interrupting. Daniel had been embezzling for years. Robert continued, his voice flat. Millions of dollars hidden in shell companies, false expenses, elaborate schemes I was too blind to see because I trusted him. When I finally discovered it and confronted him, he had everything ready, paperwork that made it look like I was the one stealing. He'd been planning his betrayal for years. Robert's hands tightened around his coffee cup. I was forced out of my own company. The legal battle froze my assets. My reputation was destroyed. And right in the middle of all this, Linda was diagnosed with cancer. The stress, the scandal, the financial ruin, it all happened at once. Oh, Robert, Sarah said softly. She fought for 2 years. Robert's voice cracked. But I couldn't afford the best treatment. Everything was tied up in legal fees fighting Daniel. She died 18 months ago, and with her went. He had to stop, overcome with emotion. Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over his. He looked up at her with grateful eyes. My other 2 kids, they're in college. They believed Daniel's lies. They think I'm a thief who brought shame on the family. They haven't spoken to me in over a year. Tommy was all I had left, and I almost lost him too because I was so consumed by grief and anger that I couldn't see he needed me. He took a shaky breath. That's who I was 3 days ago. A broken man who'd lost everything that mattered. And then you gave Tommy back to me. You showed me that not everyone is like Daniel, that good people still exist, that kindness still matters. I'm sorry for everything you've been through. Sarah said, that's too much for anyone to carry. Thank you. Robert wiped his eyes. I'm telling you all this because I want you to understand what I'm about to propose. This isn't charity. This isn't me trying to ease my guilt. This is about recognizing an opportunity when I see one. He pulled a folder from the bag beside his chair and opened it. I've spent the past 2 days thinking about my future, about what I want to build next, and I realized something. I don't want to fight for my old company anymore. I don't want to spend years in court trying to get back what Daniel stole. I want to let it go and build something new, something better, something honest. He slid papers across the table to Sarah. I want to start a cybersecurity consulting firm. Small businesses desperately need protection from cyber threats, but they can't afford the big firms. There's a massive underserved market. I have the knowledge, the experience, the contacts to make this work. Sarah looked at the papers, a business plan, market analysis, financial projections. This wasn't some hastily thrown together idea. Robert had put serious thought into this. What I need, Robert continued, is someone to handle the technical implementation, someone to build the security systems, manage the IT side, work with clients on setup and maintenance. I can sell the services and manage client relationships, but I can't do both that and the technical work. He looked at her intently. Sarah, you told me you were a software developer before you worked at the diner. What kind of development did you do? Back-end mostly, Sarah said, her mind racing. Some database work. I was just starting to learn cybersecurity protocols when I got laid off. That's perfect, Robert said, leaning forward. Sarah, I want to hire you, not as an employee, as a partner. We build this together 50-50. You handle the technical side. I handle the business side. We split ownership, we split decisions, we split profits, equal partners. Sarah felt like the air had left the room. Robert, I can't. Why not? Because I'm not qualified. I was a junior developer. I don't have the experience for something like this. You have something more valuable than experience. Robert interrupted. You have integrity, you have compassion, you care about doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. His voice grew passionate. Do you know what destroyed my first company? It wasn't lack of skills or market conditions. It was trusting someone without integrity. Daniel was brilliant, experienced, qualified on paper, and he destroyed everything because he was fundamentally dishonest. Robert looked at her with intensity. I learned the hard way that character matters more than credentials, that I'd rather build something small with someone I trust than something big with someone who might betray me. And Sarah, I saw who you are that night. I saw you risk everything to help my son. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could. This is too much, Sarah said, her head spinning. We barely know each other. You can't just offer me half a company. I'm not just offering it, Robert said firmly. I'm proposing a real partnership. built on mutual respect and shared values. Yes, it's fast. Yes, it's a risk, but sometimes you know when something is right. He pushed the papers closer to her. Take these home, read through them, think about it. I'm not asking for an answer today, just consider it. And if you have questions or concerns, call me. We can talk as much as you need. Sarah looked down at the business plan, at the financial projections that showed this could actually work, at the opportunity being handed to her by a man she'd met 3 days ago in a park in the rain. Why are you really doing this? She asked quietly. And please be honest, is this guilt, obligation? Do you feel like you owe me? Robert was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. Am I grateful? Absolutely. Do I want to help you because you helped my son? Yes, but Sarah, this isn't charity. I genuinely believe you'd be good at this. I believe we could build something real together, and selfishly this helps me too. He leaned forward. I need to build something new, something that matters, something my son can be proud of. I need to prove to myself that I can trust someone again, that not everyone is like Daniel. Working with you, partnering with someone who's shown themselves to be honest and kind, that would heal something in me too. His voice grew soft. So yes, I'm grateful. Yes, I want to help you, but I'm also asking you to help me, to believe in something with me, to build something good together. Sarah felt tears threatening. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Robert said. That's all I'm asking. Okay, Sarah whispered. I'll think about it. They talked for another hour about the business plan, about Portland's tech market, about what a partnership between them might look like. Robert was patient, answering every question, addressing every concern, never pressuring but always genuine. When they finally parted ways, Sarah clutched the folder to her chest and walked home in a daze. In her apartment, she spread the papers out on her small table and read through everything carefully. The business plan was solid. Conservative projections, realistic timelines, clear market analysis. This wasn't some pie-in-the-sky dream. This was viable, but more than that, it was a chance, a real chance to rebuild, to use her skills, to be more than just a waitress scraping by, to prove that kindness really could lead somewhere good. Her phone rang. Her mother. How did it go, baby girl? Sarah told her everything, the meeting, the proposal, the partnership offer. When she finished, Diane was quiet for a long moment. What's holding you back? Her mother asked finally. Fear, Sarah admitted. Fear that it's too good to be true. Fear that I'll fail. Fear that I'll disappoint him. Fear that I'm making a huge mistake trusting someone I barely know. Those are all valid fears, Diane said. But let me ask you this, what's the worst that could happen? Sarah thought about it. The business could fail. I could end up right back where I am now, broke and jobless. So you'd be in the same place, except you'd have tried something. You'd have taken a chance on building something meaningful instead of just surviving day to day. Diane paused. What's the best that could happen? I could actually succeed, build a career, have stability, do work that matters. And what does your gut tell you about Robert? About whether he's sincere? Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the way Robert had held Tommy, the raw emotion in his voice when he talked about his failures, the thoroughness of the business plan, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights spent caring for his son. My gut says he's genuine, Sarah said quietly, that he really does want to build something good, that this isn't a scam or charity, it's a real opportunity. Then there's your answer, baby, Diane said. Fear is natural, but don't let it keep you from grabbing hold of something good when it's offered. Sometimes blessings come in unexpected packages. After they hung up, Sarah sat with the business plan open in front of her, her mother's words echoing in her head. She thought about choices and chances, about risk and reward, about the strange way life could pivot on a single moment of kindness. 3 days ago, she'd fed a hungry child with a nickel. She'd lost her job. She'd thought her life was over. Now someone was offering her a partnership, a future, a chance to build something real. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah picked up her phone and called Robert's number. He answered on the second ring. Sarah, I want to do it, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm still scared and I still have questions, but I want to try. I want to build this with you. She could hear the smile in Robert's voice. Really, but I need to be clear about something. I don't want charity. I want to earn my place. I want to really contribute, not just be here because you feel grateful. Agreed, Robert said immediately. Here's what I'm proposing. We start small. I'll pay you a salary, $1,500 a month to start. Enough to live on but not extravagant. You'll handle all technical work,
while I manage business development and client relations. As we grow and become profitable, your salary grows. And we split ownership 50-50 from day one, so we're equally invested in making this work. $1,500 a month is more than I was making at the diner, Sarah said. It's less than you're worth, Robert countered, but it's what I can afford to pay while we're getting started. Within 6 months, if we hit our projections, it'll be more. Within a year it should be competitive with any tech job in Portland. Sarah took a deep breath. Okay, let's do this. Let's build something good. Thank you, Robert said, and his voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for believing in this, for believing in us. We're going to do something special, Sarah. I can feel it. After they hung up, Sarah sat in her apartment, the one she wouldn't have to leave now, the one that suddenly felt less like a prison, and more like a temporary stop on a journey, and let herself feel it. Hope. Real solid hope for the first time in months. She thought about her mother's words, do good baby girl, and good will find its way back to you. Maybe it really was that simple, not easy, not immediate, but real. She'd chosen kindness over self-preservation 3 days ago. She'd fed a hungry child and lost everything. And now, somehow impossibly, she was being offered a chance to build something better than what she'd lost. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at the last text from her mother. Proud of you, baby girl. Always, she typed back. Thank you for teaching me that doing good matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Then she opened her laptop and started researching everything she could about cybersecurity. If she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties, new fears to face. But tonight Sarah could rest, knowing she'd made a choice. She'd taken a chance. She'd said yes to possibility, and that felt like the beginning of something good. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah met with Robert almost daily as they laid the groundwork for Hayes Security Solutions. They signed partnership papers, opened a business bank account, registered the LLC, and started building their infrastructure. Robert had a small office space he'd been renting month to month, just 2 rooms in a modest building, but professional and functional. They filled it with second-hand desks, decent computers, a whiteboard that covered one entire wall. We're not trying to impress anyone with fancy furniture, Robert said as they set up. We're trying to deliver excellent work. That's what matters. Sarah found herself learning not just about cybersecurity, but about business itself. Robert had 20 years of experience to her 5, and he shared it generously. How to structure client contracts, how to price services, how to identify red flags and potential partnerships, how to build something sustainable instead of just chasing growth. My first company failed because I trusted the wrong person and prioritized expansion over stability, Robert told her one afternoon as they reviewed potential client targets. This time we grow deliberately. We make sure our foundation is solid before we build higher. Tommy came to the office after school most days. Sarah watched the transformation in both father and son with quiet joy. Robert had rearranged his entire life around Tommy's needs. He picked him up from school every day at 3. They did homework together in the office, then went to the park, or got ice cream before heading home for dinner. The therapy sessions were helping. Tommy's nightmares were fading, and the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by something brighter. One afternoon, Tommy was drawing at a table in the corner. While Sarah and Robert worked on their service packages, Tommy called out, "Miss Sarah, can I show you something?" Sarah walked over. Tommy held up a drawing of 3 people holding hands, a tall man labeled Dad, a smaller boy labeled me, and a woman labeled Sarah. They were standing in front of a building with our office written above it. "This is beautiful, Tommy," Sarah said, her throat tight. "You're part of our family now," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "Dad says you're his partner. That means you're like family, right?" Sarah looked at Robert, who was watching them with soft eyes. "Is that okay?" she asked. "More than okay," Robert said. "We're building something here that's bigger than just business. We're building a team, people who show up for each other." The first real test came 3 weeks in. Robert secured a meeting with a small law firm that needed cybersecurity upgrades. Sarah spent 2 days preparing, researching their current systems, identifying vulnerabilities, creating a comprehensive proposal. The morning of the meeting, she was so nervous she felt sick. "You've got this," Robert said as they drove to the client's office. "You know this stuff inside and out. Just be yourself." The meeting went better than Sarah dared hope. The senior partner, a sharp woman named Helen, asked detailed technical questions that Sarah answered clearly and confidently. By the end of the presentation, Helen was nodding. I'm impressed, Helen said. You're thorough, you're clear, and your pricing is fair. When can you start? They signed the contract that afternoon. Their first client, their first real proof that this could actually work. Sarah and Robert celebrated with cheap champagne in the office after Tommy went home with Robert's mother for the evening. We did it, Sarah said, still hardly believing it. We actually did it. You did it, Robert corrected. That presentation was all you. I just got us in the door. We're a team, Sarah said firmly. That's what you keep telling me. We do this together. Robert raised his plastic cup. To partnerships built on trust, to second chances, Sarah added. They clinked cups, and Sarah felt something settle in her chest. This was real. This was actually happening. Word spread faster than they anticipated. Helen referred them to 2 other firms. Those firms referred them to others. Within 6 weeks, Hayes Security Solutions had 5 clients. Within 3 months they had 12. They hired their first employee, a young programmer named Marcus, fresh out of college with more enthusiasm than experience but a genuine passion for the work. Remind you of anyone? Robert asked Sarah with a smile after Marcus's first day. Maybe a little, Sarah admitted. She saw herself in Marcus, hungry for an opportunity, willing to work hard, needing someone to believe in him. She took him under her wing, teaching him not just technical skills but the philosophy behind their work. We're not just here to make money, she told Marcus. We're here to protect people. Every system we secure, every vulnerability we patch, that affects real human beings, that matters. Always remember that. The business grew, and with it challenges Sarah hadn't anticipated. Managing employees, handling difficult clients, making tough decisions about pricing and priorities. She made mistakes, lots of them, but Robert was patient, teaching her, guiding her, trusting her to learn. Partnership means we both fail forward together, he said after a particularly difficult client negotiation, where Sarah had initially agreed to terms that weren't sustainable. You learn, you adjust, you do better next time. That's how this works. But success brought new pressures. By month 4, Sarah was working 50-hour weeks. The $1,500 salary had increased to $2,500 as they'd become profitable, but she found herself back in old patterns, working late, skipping meals, bringing work home. One evening, she was in the office at 8 p.m., reviewing security protocols, when Robert walked back in. He'd left at 5 to have dinner with Tommy. What are you still doing here? He asked, concern clear in his voice. Just finishing up some. Sarah, we talked about this, about not burning ourselves out, about building something sustainable. I know, but there's so much to do. There will always be too much to do. Robert interrupted gently. That's the nature of running a business, but if we work ourselves to death, we'll lose everything anyway. Trust me, I learned this lesson the hard way with Tommy. He sat down across from her. We need to hire more help, scale properly instead of trying to do everything ourselves, and we need to set boundaries and actually stick to them. Sarah knew he was right, but old fears died hard. What if we can't afford it? What if hiring too fast tanks us? What if not hiring fast enough breaks us? Robert countered. Sarah, we're profitable, we have steady clients, we can afford to bring in help, and we need to before we burn out. They spent that weekend creating a hiring plan. 2 more technical staff, 1 part-time office manager. It felt risky, but Robert's confidence helped steady Sarah's nerves. The hires transformed everything. With more hands on deck, Sarah's workload became manageable. She started leaving at reasonable hours, taking actual weekends off, having time to visit her parents again. Her mother noticed the change immediately when Sarah showed up for Sunday dinner for the first time in a month. You look better, baby girl, Diane said, pulling her into a hug. Less tired, more like yourself. I feel better, Sarah admitted. We're figuring it out, learning how to build something that doesn't consume us. Over pot roast and mashed potatoes, Sarah told her parents about the business, about Tommy, about the strange and wonderful turn her life had taken. This Robert sounds like a good man, her father Marcus said. Someone who learned from his mistakes, who puts his son first now. He is, Sarah said. He really is. And you're happy? Her mother asked, studying Sarah's face carefully. Sarah thought about it. Happy. When was the last time she'd actually been happy? Before the layoff, certainly, but even then, there'd been stress and uncertainty, and the nagging feeling that she was disposable. Now, she had a partner who valued her, work that mattered, a team that was becoming like family, stability, purpose. Yeah, Mama, Sarah said softly. I think I am. Diane reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Good, You deserve that, baby girl. You've always deserved that. The 6-month mark approached, and with it came a milestone. Sarah had been working toward enough consistent profit that they could take actual salaries, not just survival wages. Robert called a team meeting, all 7 employees now, gathered in their modest office. I want to thank everyone for the incredible work you've done these past 6 months. Robert said, we've exceeded every projection, helped dozens of clients, and built something we can all be proud of. And starting next month, everyone's getting a raise, significant raises, based on performance and contribution. The team cheered. Marcus high-fived the other developers. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, not for herself, but for what this meant. They'd actually done it, built something real and sustainable and good. After everyone else left, Robert pulled Sarah aside. I have something for you. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter, formal, legal, on official letterhead, confirmation of your 50% ownership stake. Robert explained, all properly documented and filed. You're not just an employee, Sarah, you're my equal partner. I wanted that in writing, official and clear. Sarah stared at the document, at her name listed as co-owner. She'd worked for this, earned it through long hours, and hard work and commitment, but seeing it official, documented, real, that hit differently. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me, for giving me this chance. Thank you for taking it, Robert said, for trusting me when you had every reason to be skeptical, for building this with me. I couldn't have done this without you, Sarah. Not just the business, rebuilding my life, being the father Tommy needs. You showed me what was possible. They stood there in their modest office, the one they built together from nothing, and Sarah felt overwhelming gratitude for that night 6 months ago, when a hungry boy with a nickel had walked into a diner. One choice, one moment of compassion, and it had led to all of this. What are you thinking? Robert asked, seeing her expression. I'm thinking, Sarah said slowly, that my mother was right, that doing good really does find its way back to you. Maybe not immediately, maybe not the way you expect, but eventually if you keep choosing kindness, good things follow. Your mother sounds wise. She is. Sarah smiled, and she'd like to meet you properly. Both you and Tommy. Would you come to Sunday dinner next week? We'd be honored, Robert said.
That Sunday dinner became the first of many. Sarah's parents welcomed Robert and Tommy into their home and their hearts. Tommy called Diane Miss Diane and lit up whenever Marcus told his terrible dad jokes. Robert and Sarah's father bonded over a shared love of old westerns and terrible coffee. It felt like family. Not the one Sarah had been born into, but the one she'd chosen, built through shared values and mutual respect and the simple act of showing up for each other. Hayes Security Solutions continued to grow. By the 1-year mark they had 20 employees and 35 clients. They'd moved to a larger office space, they were profitable and stable and building towards something even bigger. But more importantly, they'd created something Sarah was genuinely proud of. A company built on integrity, where employees were valued, where clients were treated ethically, where success didn't mean sacrificing your soul or your family or your values. One Thursday evening, Robert asked Sarah to stay late, not to work but to talk. I've been thinking about expansion, he said. About opening an office in Seattle, taking what we've built here and scaling it regionally. Sarah felt both excitement and apprehension. That's ambitious. It is, but I think we're ready. We've proven our model works. We've built systems that can replicate. We've created a culture worth expanding. Robert leaned forward, but I won't do it unless you're fully on board. We're partners. We move forward together or not at all. Sarah thought about it. A year ago she would have been terrified, would have focused on all the ways it could fail. But she'd learned something over the past months. She was capable of more than she'd believed. She'd built a successful business from nothing. She'd managed teams, solved complex problems, navigated challenges she'd never faced before. She'd grown into someone who could handle this. Let's do it, she said, meeting Robert's eyes. Let's see how far we can take this. Robert grinned. That's what I was hoping you'd say. As Sarah drove home that night, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From desperate diner worker to business owner. From terrified and alone to surrounded by people who believed in her. From hopeless to hopeful, all because she'd chosen, one Tuesday evening, to feed a hungry child. The circle of kindness kept expanding, touching more lives, creating more possibilities, and Sarah was just getting started. Year 2 of Hayes Security Solutions brought changes Sarah hadn't fully anticipated. The Seattle office opened in month 14, small at first, just 5 employees and a local manager Robert had carefully vetted. Within 3 months it had secured its first major client. Within 6 months it was profitable. The success was thrilling but also brought new complexities. Sarah found herself traveling between Portland and Seattle, training teams, ensuring quality standards matched across both locations. Robert was equally busy managing expansion, hiring, building the infrastructure needed to support multiple offices. They were still committed to not burning out, but the line between sustainable growth and overwork kept blurring. One Friday evening, Sarah realized she'd missed dinner with her parents for the 3rd week in a row. She called her mother to apologize. "Baby girl, I understand you're busy," Diane said gently. "But don't forget what matters. Don't let success consume you the way that old job did." The words hit hard. Sarah sat in the empty office after the call, surrounded by the trappings of success, and realized she was falling into the same trap that had nearly destroyed Robert's relationship with Tommy. The next morning, she called an emergency meeting with Robert. They met at a coffee shop, away from the office, away from the daily demands. "We need to talk," Sarah said. "We're losing ourselves again." Robert looked tired, older than he had a year ago. "I know, I've been thinking the same thing. We're successful, but at what cost? I'm missing Tommy's baseball games again. You're missing time with your parents. This isn't what we wanted to build." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We can't just stop growing. We have employees depending on us, clients with expectations." "We restructure," Robert said. "We hire senior management to handle day-to-day operations so we're not drowning in details. We've been acting like we're still a 5-person startup when we're a 40-person company. We need to work on the business, not just in it." They spent that weekend creating a plan, hired a chief operating officer, a woman named Jennifer Barnes with experience managing tech teams, promoted Marcus to technical director, giving him authority to make decisions without running everything through Sarah, brought in a head of business development to support Robert. The restructuring was expensive and required trust, delegating significant authority to people they'd only worked with for months, but it was necessary. Over the next few months the changes took hold. Jennifer proved excellent at operations, implementing systems that made everything run smoother. Marcus thrived in his leadership role. The new business head took pressure off Robert. Gradually Sarah and Robert found themselves working reasonable hours again. Sarah made it to Sunday dinners. Robert never missed Tommy's games. They reinstated their weekly check-in dinners, a tradition that had fallen away during the chaos of expansion. One evening at dinner, about 18 months into the business, Robert said something that had clearly been on his mind. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about the lawsuit with Daniel." Sarah set down her fork. "Okay, it's settled. Finally, after 3 years of legal battles, it's over." Robert's jaw tightened. He admitted to the embezzlement as part of the settlement, paid restitution. "My name is cleared." "Robert, that's wonderful. Why do you look so conflicted?" "Because it doesn't feel like I thought it would." Robert admitted, "For years I wanted vindication. I wanted everyone to know I wasn't a thief. And now that I have it, it doesn't matter as much as I thought it would." He looked at her directly. "What matters is this, what we've built. Tommy being happy and healthy. Having people I trust around me. The vindication is nice, but it's not what healed me. This company, this partnership, this life we've created." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm glad it's finally over. You deserve to have your name cleared." "Maybe," Robert said. "But more importantly, I deserve to let go of the anger. To stop defining myself by what Daniel did to me. To build something new instead of dwelling on what was lost." He smiled. "You helped me do that, Sarah. More than you know." Around the 2-year mark, something unexpected happened. A journalist from Portland Business Journal reached out, wanting to feature Hayes Security Solutions in their companies to watch segment. The resulting article was front page in the business section, complete with photos of Sarah and Robert in their office. The headline read, "Built on Kindness, How a Chance Encounter Led to Portland's Fastest Growing Tech Company." The article told their story: Tommy in the diner, Sarah's firing, Robert's gratitude, the partnership formed from mutual respect and shared values. It highlighted the company's culture, their ethical approach, their commitment to employees and clients. The response was overwhelming. The article went viral on social media. Other publications picked it up. Potential clients reached out, specifically wanting to work with the company built on kindness. Hayes Security Solutions' profile exploded. Within a month they had inquiries from across the Pacific Northwest. Within 3 months they'd signed enough new clients to justify opening a San Francisco office ahead of schedule. But the attention also brought discomfort. Sarah found herself recognized in public, people wanting to talk about the article, about Tommy, about her inspiring story. "I'm not trying to be inspiring," she told Robert, after a particularly awkward encounter at the grocery store. "I just helped a kid who needed help." "I know," Robert said sympathetically, "but people are hungry for proof that kindness matters. That integrity isn't just a nice idea, but something that can lead to real success. Whether you meant to or not, you've become a symbol of that." "I don't want to be a symbol, I just want to do good work." "Then keep doing good work," Robert said simply. "Let the rest be what it is. You can't control how people interpret your story, Sarah, but you can control whether you stay true to the values that created it." His words helped. Sarah focused on the work, on the team, on building something that lived up to the values the article had highlighted. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.